اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجهم. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجهم. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجهم. عن فاطمة الزهراء عليها السلام، عن جابر بن عبد الله الأنصاري عن فاطمة الزهراء عليها السلام بنت رسول الله صلى الله عليه وآله قال: سمعت فاطمة أنها قالت: دخل علي أبي رسول الله في بعض الأيام فقال: السلام عليك يا فاطمة. فقلت: عليك السلام. قال: إني يجد في بدني ضعفا. فقلت له: أعيذك بالله يا أبتاه من الضعف. فقال: يا فاطمة، ائتيني بالكساء اليماني فغطيني به. فأتيته بالكساء اليماني فغطيته به وصرت أنظر إليه وإذا وجهه يتلألأ كأنه البدر في ليلة تمامه وكماله. صلوات. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. فما كانت إلا ساعة وإذا بولد الحسن قد أقبل وقال: السلام عليك يا أماه. فقلت: وعليك السلام يا قرة عيني وثمرة فؤادي. فقال: يا أماه، إني أشم عندك رائحة طيبة كأنها رائحة جدي رسول الله صلى الله عليه وآله. فقلت: نعم، إن جدك تحت الكساء اليماني. فأقبل الحسن نحو الكساء وقال: السلام عليك يا جداه يا رسول الله، أتأذن لي أن أدخل معك تحت الكساء؟ فقال: وعليك السلام يا ولدي ويا صاحب حوضي، قد أذنت لك. فدخل معه تحت الكساء. فما كانت إلا ساعة وإذا بولد الحسين عليه السلام قد أقبل وقال: السلام عليك يا أماه. فقلت: وعليك السلام يا ولدي ويا قرة عيني وثمرة فؤادي. فقال لي: يا أماه، إني أشم عندك رائحة طيبة كأنها رائحة جدي رسول الله. فقلت: نعم، إن جدك وأخاك تحت الكساء. فدنا الحسين نحو الكساء وقال: السلام عليك يا جداه، السلام عليك يا من اختاره الله، أتأذن لي أن أكون معكما تحت الكساء؟ فقال: وعليك السلام يا ولدي ويا شافع أمتي، قد أذنت لك. فدخل معهما تحت الكساء. فأقبل عند ذلك أبو الحسن علي بن أبي طالب وقال: السلام عليك يا بنت رسول الله. فقلت: وعليك السلام يا أبا الحسن ويا أمير المؤمنين. فقال: يا فاطمة، إني أشم عندك رائحة طيبة كأنها رائحة أخي وابن عمي رسول الله صلى الله عليه وآله. فقلت: نعم، ها هو مع ولديك تحت الكساء. فأقبل علي نحو الكساء وقال: السلام عليك يا رسول الله، أتأذن لي أن أكون معكم تحت الكساء؟ قال له: عليك السلام يا أخي ويا وصي وخليفتي وصاحب لوائي، قد أذنت لك. فدخل علي تحت الكساء، ثم أتيت نحو الكساء وقلت: السلام عليك يا أبتاه يا رسول الله، أتأذن لي أن أكون معكم تحت الكساء؟ قال: وعليك السلام يا ابنتي ويا بضعتي، قد أذنت لك. فدخلت تحت الكساء، فلما اكتملنا جميعا تحت الكساء، أخذ أبي رسول الله بطرفي الكساء وأومى بيده اليمنى إلى السماء وقال: اللهم إن هؤلاء أهل بيتي وخاصتي وحامتي، لحمهم لحمي ودمهم دمي، يؤلمني ما يؤلمهم ويحزنني ما يحزنهم. أنا حرب لمن حاربهم، وسلم لمن سالمهم، وعدو لمن عاداهم، ومحب لمن أحبهم. إنهم مني وأنا منهم، فاجعل صلواتك وبركاتك ورحمتك وغفرانك ورضوانك علي وعليهم، واذهب عنهم وأذهب عنهم الرجس وطهرهم تطهيرا. اللهم صل على محمد. فقال الله عز وجل: يا ملائكتي ويا سكان سماواتي، إني ما خلقت سماء مبنية ولا أرضا مدحية ولا قمرا منيرا ولا شمسا مضية ولا فلكا يدور ولا بحرا يجري ولا فلكا يسري إلا في محبة هؤلاء الخمسة الذين هم تحت الكساء. فقال الأمين جبرائيل: يا رب ومن تحت الكساء؟ فقال عز وجل: هم أهل بيت النبوة ومعدن الرسالة، هم فاطمة وأبوها وبعلها وبنوها. محمد وآله. فقال جبرائيل: يا ربي يتأذن لي أن أهبط إلى الأرض لأكون معهم سادسا؟ فقال الله: نعم قد أذنت لك. فهبط الأمين جبرائيل وقال: السلام عليك يا رسول الله. العلي الأعلى يقرئك السلام ويخصك بالتحية والإكرام ويقول لك: وعزتي وجلالي إني ما خلقت سماء مبنية ولا أرضا مدحية ولا قمرا منيرا ولا شمسا مضية ولا فلكا يدور ولا بحرا يجري ولا فلكا يسري إلا لأجلكم ومحبتكم، وقد أذن لي أن أدخل معكم، فهل تأذنني يا رسول الله؟ فقال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وآله: وعليك السلام يا أمين وحي الله، إنه نعم قد أذنت لك. فدخل جبرائيل معنا تحت الكساء فقال: إن الله قد أوحى إليكم يقول: إنما يريد الله ليذهب عنكم الرجس أهل البيت ويطهركم تطهيرا. اللهم صل على محمد. فقال علي لأبي: يا رسول الله، أخبرنا ما لجلوسنا هذا تحت الكساء من الفضل عند الله. فقال النبي صلى الله عليه وآله: والذي بعثني بالحق نبيا واصطفاني بالرسالة نجيا، ما ذكر خبرنا هذا في محفل من محافل أهل الأرض وفيه جمع من شيعتنا ومحبينا إلا ونزلت عليهم الرحمة وحفت بهم الملائكة واستغفرت لهم إلى أن يتفرقوا. فقال علي عليه السلام: إذن والله فزنا وفاز شيعتنا ورب الكعبة. فقال أبي رسول الله صلى الله عليه وآله: يا علي، والذي بعثني بالحق نبيا واصطفاني بالرسالة نجيا، ما ذكر خبرنا هذا في محفل من محافل أهل الأرض وفيه جمع من شيعتنا ومحبينا وفيهم مهموم إلا وفرج الله همه، ولا مغموم إلا وكشف الله غمه، ولا طالب حاجة إلا وقضى الله حاجته. فقال علي عليه السلام: إذن والله فزنا وسعدنا، وكذلك شيعتنا فازوا وسعدوا في الدنيا والآخرة ورب الكعبة.
محمد وآل محمد صلوات. صادق آل محمد کا جنازہ ہے اٹھا، صادق آل محمد کا جنازہ ہے اٹھا، لعنتی منصور نے ہے زہر مولا کو دیا، صادق آل محمد روتے ہیں موسیٰ کاظم سر کو اپنے پیٹ کر، روتے ہیں موسیٰ کاظم سر کو اپنے پیٹ کر، اٹھ گیا مولا کے سر سے آج سایہ باپ کا، اٹھ گیا مولا کے سر سے آج سایہ باپ کا، صادق آل محمد خون ہے دھوکے سے بہایا مصطفیٰ کی آل کا، خون ہے دھوکے سے بہایا مصطفیٰ کی آل کا، کلمہ گو تو نے نبی کو ہے دیا کیسا صلہ، کلمہ گو تو نے نبی کو ہے دیا دیا کیسا صلہ صادق آل محمد، چاک کر کے تم گریباں مومنوں ماتم کرو، چاک کر کے تم گریباں مومنوں ماتم کرو، مولا باقر کے پسر کا ہے لہو نا حق بہا، مولا باقر کے پسر کا ہے لہو نا حق بہا، صادق آل محمد، علم کی خوشبو سے جس نے دہر کو مہکا دیا، علم کی خوشبو سے جس نے دہر کو مہکا دیا، علم قرآن و شریعت سب انہی کی ہے عطا، علم قرآن و شریعت سب انہی کی ہے عطا،
من لسانی يفقهوا قولي. الحمد لله رب العالمين، ثم الصلاة والسلام على سيدنا ونبينا وحبيب إله العالمين أبي القاسم محمد، اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعلى آله الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين، واللعنة على أعدائهم أجمعين من الآن إلى قيام يوم الدين. أما بعد، فقد قال إمامنا جعفر بن محمد الصادق عليه السلام: النفس مهموم لظلمنا تسبيح، وهمه لنا عبادة، وكتمانه لسرنا جهاد في سبيل الله. ثم قال إمامنا: يجب أن يكتب هذا الحديث بالذهب. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم، بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم، اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. أعظم الله أجورنا وأجوركم بذكرنا الاستشهاد إمام الصادق عليه السلام. Respected elders, brothers and sisters, may Allah increase in our reward for the commemoration of the shahadat of our sixth Imam, Ja'far ibn Muhammad as-Sadiq alayhi salam. Alhamdulillah for the blessing of the love of Ahlul Bayt that has brought us together and given us an opportunity to discuss the affairs of Ahlul Bayt. And while it's my first time reciting in Edmonton with the Islamic Shia Ethna Sharia Association, inshallah, next time or another time it'll be in person, but at least we've had the opportunity to get together and discuss the affairs of Ahlul Bayt. The 25th of Shawwal is commonly recorded and commemorated as the Shahadat of our sixth Imam, the Imam by whose name we are given the title Madhab Ja'fari, or Ja'fari, that we are the school of thought that follows Imam as-Sadiq alayhi salam. The role of Imam as-Sadiq, khususan for us as Ithna Ashari, is so large that this shahadat is something that we should ensure is commemorated, and is commemorated with great circumstance, and that it's not something small that we don't pay close attention to. To explain why this is so significant, when we look at our mabna are sources by which we make laws. Amongst the four major sources of Quran, Hadith, Ijma' and Akal, Hadith is one of the main doors that we use, and the treasure of Hadith that we possess is something that is important for us to be able to understand what it is that Shari al-Muqaddas, that Allah has asked us to perform. The tradition of ahadith that us, the followers of the Ahlul Bayt, possess is more than other schools of thought, on the principle that while other schools of thought only take their ahadith from the life of our holy Prophet Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad, we benefit from the fact that we have access to the Ahlul Bayt, and the ahadith of the Ahlul Bayt further give us more information and more sources that we can rely upon to learn about what it is that Allah has demanded from us. In the treasure of ahadith, Madhab Ja'fari has approximately a treasure of about 65,000 hadith that we look at and that we possess, that we research in our four authentic books, in our various sources that come from Ahlul Bayt. The significance of our sixth Imam and the importance of our sixth Imam is that roughly half of those ahadith begin with قال إمامنا الصادق عليه السلام اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. Meaning that for our understanding of our faith, the effort and the work that was exerted by our sixth Imam is critical. Therefore, the shahadat of our Imam should be something that we commemorate, and we truly spend in mourning, and we come out in numbers, and that we make it a significant act of who we have lost, the one who laid the foundations by which we were able to learn about Allah. And these efforts of our sixth Imam were not something simple or easy for him to perform, but rather took great efforts on his behalf for us to reach these benefits and to have these ahadith in our treasure. If you take a look and you see that we know the life of the sixth Imam went through great difficulty to get us these ahadith, because take a look and see that he is the last of the Imams who is buried in Baqi close to Rasulullah. That after his shahadat, the Banu Abbas worked so hard to uproot the tree of Ali Muhammad that they created so much separation between the people and the Imam. And they put so much oppression on the Imams that no Imam after Imam Sadiq is buried in the city of Medina. Even when we look at, for example, the narrations that talk to us about the final wasaya, and our discussion tonight will be around the important wills that Imam Sadiq left us. Amongst his wills that was left in the public arena was that Mansur al-Dawaniqi Mal'un had said that whoever Ja'far al-Sadiq appoints as his successor, kill him immediately. Imam al-Sadiq had to hide the name of Imam Musa al-Kadhim amongst 5 people, which included Mansur al-Dawaniqi and the wife of Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salam, such that the people would not be able to attack Imam al-Kadhim from that moment. The schisms that exist within the religion of Madhab Ja'fari occurred after, many of them occurred after the Shahadat of Imam al-Sadiq. That people split into different sects, the Fatahiyya, the Ismailiyya, all of these came about after the Shahadat of the Imam. This shows the difficulty the Imam went through to preserve and protect the religion of Islam so that it would reach us in the form it is today. Today, if we understand what it is that Allah asks of us, the ibadat that we have to perform, the wajibat that we have to perform, staying away from the haram and forbidden actions, the great fundamental of this is by the efforts of Imam al-Sadiq. And the efforts of Imam al-Sadiq were not simply in the point of introducing hadith and teaching, though that is a great aspect. Whether we take a look at and we see that 4,000 students at one time Imam Sadiq would be able to teach, or that after his shahadat, the preservation of Islam was such that when people walked into Masjid al-Nabawi, they would say, we saw 900 scholars teaching in Masjid al-Nabawi, each of whom would begin with قَالَ أُسْتَادُنَا إِمَامُنَا جَعْفَرَ الصَّادِقِ عَلَيْهِ السَّلَامُ, that our teacher Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salam said. the protection, the perseverance of Islam relies on the efforts of this Imam. As such, as we appreciate and we understand that our inheritance of faith is built by the hands of Imam Sadiq, there are 4 narrations that I want to share, 3 of which come from the Wasiyah of Imam Sadiq alayhi salam, that in his final days, the final time of his life, the messages that he left for us, such that we ensure that we too are following the best that we can to the lessons that our Imam left us. And one hadith that we'll begin with, that we began our discussion with, that has within it something unique and different that's worth mentioning as well as understanding very well. In this hadith, Imam Sadiq makes a statement. He says, "An-nafsu mahmum li-dhulmina tasbih, wa hammuhu lana ibadah, wa kitmanu li-sirrina jihadun fi sabilillah." This ahadith is narrated by both Shaykh al-Qulayni in Al-Kafi and by Shaykh al-Mufid in his book Al-Amali. In Shaykh al-Mufid's book of Amali, this comes from Aban ibn Taghlab, who is one of the trustworthy supporters of the Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam. And in Shaykh Qulayni's book, it comes from Isa ibn Mansur. Isa ibn Mansur was someone who is considered that his hadith are sahih as well. And there's even a narration of Imam Sadiq that says that if you want to see a person of heaven, look at this Isa ibn Mansur. So these are reliable, authentic narrators who have given us this hadith. And what's unique about this hadith and why it's worth mentioning is that after Imam mentions his hadith, he says a statement, يجب أن يكتب هذا الحديث بالذهب. When he says to Aban ibn Taghlab after narrating this hadith, he says, it is mandatory, yajibu, it is mandatory that you write this hadith in gold. Now, there are many hadith that we've been given, but I can't think of very many examples where the Imam has given such severity and instruction that write this in gold. Therefore, this becomes an important lesson for us to pay attention to ensure that we benefit from this hadith. It begins with An-nafasul mahmum li dhulmina tasbih. Nafasul mahmum refers to the begrieved sigh or the breathing of sorrowfulness. Imam Sadiq says the one who takes a begrieved sigh when our oppression is mentioned, that this is an act of tasbih in the eyes of Allah. Now, tasbih is something we've understood about, the importance of it, the character of doing dhikr of Allah, the benefits that we receive. But Imam Sadiq is showing us the proximity of how we approach Allah through Ahlul Bayt. That our affiliation with Ahlul Bayt, Allah has designated a great status. That wherever you may be, whatever you may be doing, that when you hear of the difficulties of Ahlul Bayt and your sigh, your breathing is affected by it, that breath that you take as you're thinking of the difficulties of Ahlul Bayt becomes a tasbih, becomes a dhikr of Allah. How amazing is this mention of Ahlul Bayt? The commemoration of the sorrows of Ahlul Bayt is so important for us. Which is why one of the important things that we received as the inheritance from Imam Sadiq was he taught us the significance of the events of Karbala, the significance of the commemoration of the events of Karbala, and that we should not be separated from Imam al-Hussain alayhi salam. There's even narrations that, for example, when one would come and recite poetry and Imam would begin to cry, they would want to stop to see the Imam in such difficulty that they didn't want to continue this process of upsetting the Imam. But the Imam said, no, keep reciting, until his entire household would weep for Imam al-Hussain. And he would still say, keep reciting. Imam Sadiq taught us that one who makes 100 people cry for Imam Hussain, I guarantee him heaven. And he said, no, one who makes 10 people cry, 9 people, 8 people, until he got, you make one person cry for the sake of Imam al-Hussain, I guarantee you that you will go to heaven. And he goes further, he says, no, if you yourself cry, don't make anyone else cry, you cry, I guarantee you'll go to heaven. And then he went even further. He said, if you were to even force yourself to cry, and you cried a tear the size of the wing of a fly, it would become your wasila into heaven. The Imam teaches, and this is why he teaches, is nafasul mahmum le dhulmina tasbih. That if these tears are your wasila to Jannah, you hearing about our oppression and being begrieved by this oppression is tasbih of Allah. This is such an amazing point that the Imam makes. The second point the Imam makes in this is al-hammuhu lana ibadah. This ham that's mentioned, in some cases it can refer to the idea of sorrow, that your sorrow for the sake of Ahlul Bayt is ibadah. And ibadah has many doors. That it could be, for example, that when we take a look at the doors of ibadah, there is ibadah that, for example, fasting, there is hajj, there is salat, there is also showing kindness to your neighbors, there's amar bil ma'ruf, that it could be a reference that talks about the idea that any type of sorrow that you possess for Ahlul Bayt will be an example of worship of Allah. However, a more clear explanation is himmatuhu lana ibadah. Your striving in the way of Ahlul Bayt is ibadat. Striving in the way of Ahlul Bayt, listening to their speech, trying to apply their speech in your life, following their examples in your life, and trying to become like Ahlul Bayt is an act of worship. Getting closer and closer to them, whatever you do, that you listen to their words, you listen to their speeches, you hear about their character, you see what they did in their life, and you try to apply it in your life, that this will be an act of worship that Allah will acknowledge it as. This opens an interesting conversation. We'll take it very briefly here for a second here, that sometimes there's a discussion that says that how can we try to be like Imam Ali alayhi salam? How can we try to follow his example? Shuf, look, Imam Zainul Abidin, Sayyidus Sajidin, the adornment of worshippers, the master of those who prostrate before Allah, used to look at the ibadat of Imam Ali and say that no one can worship Allah the way Imam Ali did. We're not talking about, there's two types of, for example, following the example of Ahlul Bayt, and even following the salat of Ahlul Bayt and the ibadat of Ahlul Bayt. There is one that we recreate the physical action that the Imam performs. That if the Imam prayed 1,000 rakat, we pray 1,000 rakat. The other aspect is that we perform the ibadat of Allah in the spirit with which the Ahlul Bayt performed the ibadat of Allah. It may be that I can't perform 1,000 rakat in a day and night the way Imam Ali alayhi salam used to. Very likely. But that doesn't mean that those 2 rakat of Salat al-Fajr, those 4 rakat of Salat al-Dhuhr, when I perform them, that I shouldn't be thinking that my intention, my focus, my devotion to Allah should be like the example of Imam Ali alayhi salam. That my desire that I am focused on Allah, I'm separated from this world, is what I'm doing in this exact moment, and worshiping Allah is what the goal is. When we say follow the example of Ahlul Bayt, the physical example of worshiping exactly the way they worshipped, maybe we can't perform it. Maybe we don't possess that ability. Maybe Allah will give us the tawfiq that we can do that. But when we say that we want to follow their example, that our striving in their way should be that we incorporate the spirit of their actions, the spirit of their intention into our actions. That whatever we're doing, we do it that if I was the true Shia, and inshallah may Allah make us amongst the true Shia of Ahlul Bayt, what would be my intention and behavior in this exact action? How should I execute this action so as to ensure that what I'm doing is exactly the best that I can in following the seerah and the example of Ahlul Bayt? When I perform like this, when I focus like this is what Imam Sadiq is saying. Hammuhu lana ibadah. That his effort in our way and to follow our example, Allah will write this as ibadat of Allah. The third point that we see that the Imam makes in this, kitmanuhu lisirrina jihadun fi sabilillah. That his preserving our secrets is as if he is performing jihad in the way of Allah. This third point speaks to the obligation of having the knowledge pertaining to Ahlul Bayt is not something that is given to anyone at any point in time. That rather, there is appropriate comments for appropriate environments. And this lesson for us is something that now in the age of media, we're still learning and we're still developing. That we pay attention to what is the content that's appropriate to go out for public consumption, and which is that comment and those pieces of information about Ahlul Bayt that are designated for us. Certain lessons of the Ahlul Bayt are those that without having an understanding and ma'rifah of who the Ahlul Bayt are, that they can be something that is misinterpreted or abused or misappropriated or shared with those people who would do the Ahlul Bayt harm, or are looking to cause difficulty for the Ahlul Bayt and to separate people from Ahlul Bayt. These types of characteristics ensures that Imam is explaining that your understanding that what is the appropriate place and location for each statement and where you should talk about some affairs and where you shouldn't talk about some affairs is jihad fi sabilillah, is fighting in the way of Allah. In various hadith, we see that those who share our secrets inappropriately take part in our abuse and our oppression and our killing of the Ahlul Bayt. Look and see that, for example, in the Shahadat of Imam al-Kadhim, who brought him to the oppressor and had him imprisoned was his own cousin. In some narrations it explains that people who went and they shared information inappropriately were the ones who were responsible for oppression being caused to the Ahlul Bayt. This is why it's important that we pay attention that not all discussions about Ahlul Bayt are intended for all people. In support of this, there's a hadith that is attributed to Nabi Isa ibn Maryam. لا تعلق القلادة في أعناق الخنازير. Nabi Isa alayhi salam, when he speaks to his Hawariyun, when he speaks to his disciples, he says, do not place لا تعلق قلادة في أعناق الخنازير. Don't place necklaces, jewelry, like chains and signets in the necks of pigs. When they asked him, when they wanted to understand what does this mean, the Prophet explains, he says, this knowledge that we give you, this information that we give you, these secrets and realities of the world and the worship of Allah are like jewelry, are jewels. But they should be given to those that are appropriate, that will appreciate it and will become closer to Allah. Not those who will wear them as an adornment but never benefit from them, or that are not worthy of receiving this information because they have no ability to process it. They have no ability to appreciate it. It is an abuse of the knowledge to be given to the wrong person. This hadith where Nabi Isa is attributed of saying of pigs, that those who have no appreciation of the knowledge that they should receive are like pigs. They're like animals. Even in the Quran we see they are like cattle. بَلْ هُمْ أَضَلُّ كَالْأَنْعَامِ بَلْ هُمْ أَضَلُّ, that they are like cattle. No, they are worse than cattle. That those who are ignorant and don't pay attention to the signs in this world. This is the reality the Imam is pointing to when he says, وَكِتْمَانُ لِسِرِّنَا جِهَادٌ فِي سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ, that protecting our secrets is like fighting in the way of Allah. So that we should ensure that what we know about Ahlul Bayt we share with the audience that's appropriate. We are careful of what we put out in the world. We ensure that the audience we are speaking to is capable of understanding, and out of the love of Ahlul Bayt, we don't overshare those qualities that someone doesn't have an appreciation or understanding to be able to follow, and that instead of creating love in the hearts of people, we create suspicion and doubt in the hearts of people. When the Imam finishes these 3 points, he says, يجب أن تكتب هذا الحديث أن يكتب هذا الحديث بالذهب. It is mandatory for you that you write this hadith in gold. From amongst all of the narrations of the Imam, and we said over 30,000 narrations we've received from him, this is a unique statement the Imam makes. And the significance of this tells us that this hadith is not something we should ignore, but rather that we should make it a focal point in our relationship with Ahlul Bayt. Whether it's through the commemoration of the difficulties they have gone through, an-nafasu mahmum li dhulmina, tasbih, that the degree of being sad and sorrowful over the difficulties of Ahlul Bayt is tasbih, that following their example is ibadat of Allah, protecting their secrets is jihad in the way of Allah. The Imam is giving us instruction of the greatness of the proximity we attain to Allah through our relationship with Ahlul Bayt. And that this is something that we need to remember and preserve. When a hadith like this is given to us, it's to ensure that we don't get separated from Ali Muhammad. This is why the Imam is saying, write this in gold. One interpretation could be why the Imam says, write this in gold, is for this exact reason. That don't let anyone separate you from us. We are central to your worship of Allah. The path to Allah leads to Allah through us. And you need to come to us to find your way to Allah. When you're sad for us, it is tasbih of Allah. When you follow our example, it is ibadat of Allah. When you protect our affairs, it is jihad for the sake of Allah. So, O mu'mineen, O Ja'fari, don't get lost in this world and separated from us. Stay close to us, is the instruction of the Imam through this hadith, and it's a very important instruction that we should maintain. Now, of all of the ahadith that we have learned from Imam Sadiq alayhi salam, there are three that we'll mention that are associated with today, the 25th of Shawwal, that are associated with his final wills that he left for us as an instruction. That as we commemorate the sorrow of this day, we look at the lessons that the Imam left us. In one narration, one of the companions and the lovers of Imam Sadiq came to visit him at the end of his life. And when he came to visit Imam Sadiq, he found him in a condition that he was in difficulty and in pain. And Imam Sadiq looked at him and says, why are you crying? Why do I see you sad when you see me in this condition? Or why do I see you crying now? And the man says, Ya Ibn Rasulullah, you've been my teacher, you have been an instructor, I've seen you working and doing all these things, and now I see you sick and in bed, and I see you on the verge of death. It makes me cry to see your separation from you. Imam Sadiq explains to him, he says, certainly a mu'min, فَإِنَّ مُؤْمِن إِذَا مُلْقَ الشَّرْقِ وَالْغَرْبِ كَانَ خَيْرًا لَهُ. That if a mu'min, مَلَكَ الشَّرْقِ وَالْغَرْبِ, if a mu'min was to be able to possess everything that exists in this earth from the east to the west, it would certainly be good for him, وَيَشْكُرْ لِلَّهِ, and he would be someone who thanks Allah for it. And then he continues, he says, وَكَانَ إِذَا إِبْتُلِيَ فَهُوَ خَيْرٌ لَهُ. But at the same point in time, a mu'min is someone that even if instead of owning everything that exists in the east and the west, he was to be overcome with difficulties, ibtala, that he is overcome with difficulties, he would still be someone who acknowledges that it is good for him. And fasbir, wa idha sabara yu'ajir lahu. Yu'ajar lahu. Imam makes the statement, he says, and if he should be someone who is overcome and he acknowledges that it's still good for him, then in this condition he should be patient through these difficulties, and that patience would be something that Allah would reward him for. So the Imam makes this important wasiyah to us. O mu'mineen, acknowledge that there is khair in everything that befalls you. If you should take ownership of everything, understand there is khair in it for you, and thank Allah for it. And if you should be overcome with difficulties, then understand there is goodness in this difficulty that you are going through, and be patient through it. And that patience is what Imam was moving these mu'mineen to, and moving us to. Be patient in your difficulties. Don't let your sorrows overcome you. Be patient, and as much patience as you exert, that's how much Allah will reward you for the actions you go through. It's a very important lesson that Imam leaves at the end of his life for us, that be careful and be responsible for patience and pay attention to the difficulties that you go through. Don't let difficulties overcome and change your behavior in the way of Allah. The same way that we wouldn't want wealth and status to change our relationship with Allah, we don't want difficulties to change our relationship with Allah, and that we should continue to be consistent in being thankful and appreciative of all that Allah has given us, because there is khair for us whether we receive everything we want, and there is khair for us whether we go through difficulties. The second wasiyah that comes to us is that at the end of his life, Imam Sadiq alayhi salam took out and instructed that an amount of money of 70 dinars. 70 dinars is a lot of money in that time. A dinar is 1.5 grams of gold. Imam instructs that 70 dinars of his wealth should be given to a person by the name of Hassan al-Aftas. He says, give this amount of money to my cousin Hassan al-Aftas. Hassan al-Aftas was someone who was though he was related to the Imam, was an adversary of the Imam, such that at one point in time, Hassan al-Aftas raised a sword against Imam Ja'far as-Sadiq alayhi salam. When the Imam gives this instruction, give my cousin Hassan 70 dinars. 70 dinars, again, is not a small amount of money. It's not like, for example, I have a few dollars in my pocket I want to give to someone. No, 70 dinars is a big sum of money. But the Imam instructs, give this money to Hassan al-Aftas. His companions complain, Ya ibn Rasulullah, Hassan al-Aftas, the one who raised the sword on you, the one who tried to attack you, the one who wanted to break relations, who wanted to cause you harm. Why are you giving this to him? Why should we give him this? And Imam Sadiq explains, he says, Allah has commanded us to keep the relations of the womb. And I would like to meet Allah as someone who kept the relations of the womb, even when someone tried to break those relations with me. This instruction is so important. Many times, if we have a good relationship with someone, we're happy to keep relations with them. We're happy to be connected to them. But when someone, for example, insults us, hurts our feelings, far be it raises a sword on us or tries to cause us physical harm, we use their behavior as a justification to break relations with them. I have nothing to do with him. He wants nothing to do with me. I have nothing to do with him. Imam Sadiq is explaining that we are those who keep relation with people even if they break relations with us. Ensure that your family relations are kept. This day and age, to keep family relations, there's many examples of it. For example, that you can go and visit someone. 2, you can do khair for them, give them some benefit, give them some assistance. 3, remove some difficulty from their path or their life. You can remove some obstacle or assist them in a difficulty. Or you can just simply, even, for example, there are ahadith that tell us by giving a cup of water to someone is keeping silai raham. Saying salamu alaykum to someone can be keeping of silai raham. All of these doors of silai raham, today it's even easier. You don't even have to open your mouth. You can take your phone and text a relative that you don't speak to. I don't say you should share forwards with them, because sometimes forwarding someone something is actually trying to break relations with them instead of keeping relations with them. But simply connect. Connect with your relatives. Stay attached to them. Imam Sadiq is showing the importance of staying attached to relatives, that even in his time of death, the Imam is remembering not just the relatives who are close to him and who listen to him and who are attached to him. He's even remembering those relatives who want nothing to do with him. And he's trying to connect with them. He's trying to ensure a good relation with them. The third wasiyah of the Imam, famously, that the Imam, as he was coming and going from consciousness, at one point in time, he instructed, collect all of my relatives and bring them to me. See, the second example we shared now is Imam giving instruction on connecting with those relatives who wouldn't come to him, that he still offered to connect to them. But now the Imam is saying, bring all of my relatives, the whole family, bring them to me. I want to give them my wasiyah. when all of the relatives of Imam Sadiq, all those who had qaraba and connection and closeness to the Imam, collected by the Imam gives his wasiyah in one simple statement. One short phrase he says. And this is his wasiyah to his family. And it's a very important wasiyah. لا تنالوا شفاعتنا مستخفا للصلاة. Our shafa'ah, our intercession, our assistance will not reach those mustakhifan lis-salat. Mustakhifan lis-salat, those who take salat lightly. Now this statement, some have come about and said, yes, those who take salat lightly, meaning they don't pray. This we don't agree with. Why? Because if in the Quran Allah is admonishing waylun lil musallin, woe be to those who are the prayerful people, alladhina hum an salatihim sahun, those who are careless of their prayer, Allah is admonishing them in the Quran. What would the point be of the Imam admonishing someone who doesn't pray at all? Because the Quran has gone so far as to admonish that there are people amongst you who pray, but they're careless of their prayers, that they're those who are alladhina hum an salatihim sahun, that they are careless, they're forgetful of their prayers, they don't pay attention to it. What are they doing? When are they doing? Are they praying correctly? They don't pray on time. The advice of the Imam shouldn't be less than that. Mustakhifan lis-salat is the one who does not give priority and importance to prayers. That the Imam is saying, La tanalu shafa'atana, that our intercession will not reach those who are carefree of their prayers, who take their prayers lightly. Some examples of how this becomes an issue. For example, one of the contemporary issues is keeping our cell phone on and with us. Have you ever noticed if you're praying, almost indefinitely your phone will ring, whether it's a notification, whether it's a phone call, and immediately your mind goes to who's calling me, who's messaging me, who's replying to me. We become lost in our prayer. Allah we forget, and the phone we remember. Why? One of the important things, turn off your phone, silence, put it far away. So that when you're in a state of prayer, that there is nothing that distracts you from Allah, that you can focus on Allah. You can be closer to Him. Ensuring about the timing of prayer, paying attention to the schedule when we need to pray, paying attention to where we are and ensuring that we aren't in a place that would prevent us from prayer when it's time to pray. Ensuring that we build our travel plans around prayer. Sometimes it happens. Time for salat is at 1 o'clock. I plan to leave at 1 o'clock, so I'll pray when I get there. Or I'm planning to leave at 12:30. Namaz time is 1 o'clock. I'll deal with it later. It's a 5-hour drive. We'll pray when we get there. We need to try and build the responsibility the Imam is giving the wasiyah to his closest of relatives. Do you understand the significance of that? That the Imam is telling his closest relatives that our intercession will not reach you. Though you are those who have lived with me in my house, you have blood relations with me, my shafa'ah won't reach you. I won't be able to help you on the Day of Judgment if you don't take the worship of Allah seriously. Then where do we fall in this category? We are so much further away from the Imam. Physically, through relation. It's very important that we ensure the importance of prayer. My Imam was poisoned by Mansur al-Dawaniqi mal'oon when there was no way for him to further abuse the Imam. Imam Sadiq in his life suffered many difficulties, including that Mansur would say, bring Imam Sadiq to me in the middle of the night and bring him in the worst of ways. There would be soldiers who would come to the door of the Imam and without permission enter. And they would find the Imam in a state of worship in his shirt and pants in his house. And they would say, Mansur has called you. And the Imam would say, then let me take my cloak. And they would say, no, Mansur has not allowed you to take a cloak. The Imam would say, we the Ahlul Bayt do not like to go out without covering our head. Let me cover my head before I go. They would say, no, Mansur has not allowed you. He would say, then at least let me put on my shoes so that we can go. And they would say, Mansur has not allowed it. They would take a rope and tie the hands of the Imam and pull him from his house. It reminds us of the life of Amir al-Mu'mineen. when he was taken from the house of Sayyidah Zahra on the night that they burned the door of Sayyidah Zahra, that they dragged Amir al-Mu'mineen through the streets of Medina. Hi, Imam al-Sadiq, they dragged you through the streets of Medina like your father, Imam Ali. Mansour put abuse upon abuse on Imam al-Sadiq, including at one time they lit the house of Imam al-Sadiq on fire. Imam al-Sadiq, when he was in the house with his women, the fire was set. The women ran from room to room. Imam al-Sadiq himself was the one who was putting out the fire. It said that the next day when the Shia heard that the house of Imam al-Sadiq was lit on fire, they came to visit him. They said, we found Imam al-Sadiq weeping. We said, Yabna Rasulullah, isn't it Imam Zainul Abidin who taught us that for you, that this is normal for you, shahadat is normal for your house, it's not something that should be wept over, then why do you cry? Imam al-Sadiq says, I remember when the fire was in my house and it had begun to surround the women, and the women would run from room to room. I was there to protect them. I was there to help them. It made me remember my aunt Zainab in Karbala, when she was alone and the women of Imam al-Hussain had been surrounded by the fire. Do you remember how they called out, Ahriqu buyut al-Dhalimeen, burn the houses of the oppressors? And my mother Zainab was alone there with the ladies. I cry for my mother Zainab. I don't cry that they lit our houses on fire. Oh mu'mineen, they have been lighting our houses on fire since my mother Zahra. This is not what disturbs me. Eventually they came and they poisoned Imam al-Sadiq. Imam al-Sadiq in his final day was surrounded by his family. His children had come to him. We imagine that his head was in the lap of Imam Musa Kazim. As the sweat of death overtook his brow, his eyes became heavy, his breathing became shallow, his hands moved and opened and closed until eventually his soul left his body and his sons were around him. Oh, Imam al-Sadiq, with all due respect, when you left this world, your children sat by you. Hi, Hussain, where were your children when you left this world? Where was Akbar? Why did he not sit by you? Because he was sleeping with a spear in his chest. Oh, Asghar, why did you not comfort your father in the time of death? Asghar, you were the one whose neck had been split from ear to ear. You had flapped your arms in the hands of your father. Your blood had covered the beard of Abu Abdullah. How could you comfort Imam al-Hussain? Hi, Zainul Abidin, your father was killed alone. Your sickness prevented you from supporting him. Imam al-Hussain, you were not surrounded by your sons. You were not surrounded by your brothers. There was no Abbas by you. His arms had been cut. There was no Qasim, your nephew, by you. He had been trampled by the horses. Oh, Imam al-Hussain, at your shahadat, you were surrounded by the enemies. They describe when Imam al-Hussain fell from his horse, he would try to rise, they would stab him with spears. Those who were afraid would throw rocks at him. Oh, Imam al-Hussain, the head of Imam al-Sadiq was in the lap of Imam al-Qadim, but your head was in the hands of Shimar Mal'un. ألا لعنة الله على القوم الظالمين وسيعلم الذين ظلموا أي منقلب ينقلبون. With tears in your eyes, ندعوك باسمك العظيم الأعظم الأعز الأجل الأكرم يا الله. 10 times, Ya Allah, 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 Ya Allah. Ya Mahmud بحق محمد يا أعلى بحق علي يا فاطر السماوات والأرض بحق فاطمة يا محسن بحق الحسن يا قديم الأحسان بحق الحسين. Oh Allah, accept this small ibadat from us. Ya Allah, forgive our sins and cover our flaws. Ya Allah, there are those amongst our families, our communities, the mu'mineen, wherever they are, who are suffering through sickness and difficulty. Ya Allah, give shafa'ah to the mu'mineen wherever they are. O Allah, we have gathered and we have hajat in our hearts that we ask you by the wasila of Ahlul Bayt. Ya Allah, fulfill the hajat of all of the mu'mineen. Ya Allah, keep our children on the upright path of Ali Muhammad and following the path of Ja'fari, following the path of Imam Sadiq. O Allah, keep our children from the upright supporters of Sahib al-Zaman. Hasten the reappearance of the remainder of Zahra. Hasten the reappearance of Sahib al-Zaman. And entitle us to Shafa of Imam al-Hussain in dunya and in akhirah. 1 Surah Fatiha, 3 times Surah Ikhlas, لأرواح المؤمنين والمؤمنات مع الصلوات. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين.